You ever see this happen? A well-respected organization, a university, a big company, a government agency, suddenly just spirals into a crisis. And it seems to come out of absolutely nowhere. They've got smart leaders, they've got good intentions, but they just seem to repeatedly fall apart under pressure. Well, in this explainer, we're going to unpack the hidden reason why that keeps happening. I mean, really think about it. Some issue just blows up online. All of a sudden, leaders are scrambling, making these rushed, high-stakes decisions. It feels chaotic, it feels reactive, and if we're being honest, it feels kind of predictable. So if you've ever watched this play out and thought to yourself, how on earth did we end up here again? You are asking the perfect question. Because this is the exact loop so many institutions get stuck in, right? A problem explodes, management wings it, comes up with some quick fix. Then, consultants get brought in for a big, expensive review. And what happens? A year later, it's total déjà vu. The same thing happens all over again. That pattern, that tells us the real problem isn't the crisis of the week, but something way deeper that we're just not seeing. Okay, so let's get into the cause. When you actually look at the standard tools institutions use to manage themselves, you start to see that there's this huge critical piece missing, right in the middle of everything. So on one side, you've got governance. This is your board of directors, your leadership structure, all that stuff. It's all about authority, accountability. Basically, it answers the question, who gets to make the call? Then, over on the other side, you have risk management. That's the team whose whole job is to think about everything that could possibly go wrong and have a plan for it. But here's the catch, and this is so important. Both governance and risk management are absolutely essential, but they both assume that there's a stable, functioning environment for them to operate in. The thing is, they don't actually create that stability themselves. And that gap, right there between them, that's where really good institutions start to crack. So what is supposed to fill that gap? Well, it's a concept called the Institutional Operating Architecture, or IOA for short. Now, this isn't some new buzzword or management fad. It's really just giving a name to the invisible foundation that's supposed to hold everything else up. So what is it, really? The IOA is the set of conditions that basically dictates how the whole institution works during the normal, quiet times, in between the big board meetings and the emergency fire drills. It doesn't decide what the institution should do, but it shapes how it's able to act, how it learns, and how it adapts day to day. And this table just lays it all out so clearly. You see, governance is focused on decisions. Risk management is focused on events. But the IOA, it's focused on the conditions that exist between all of that. And here's the kicker. When your IOA starts to fail, the warning sign isn't just one bad decision or some financial loss. It's that frustrating, repeating cycle of crisis that we talked about at the very beginning. Now, I know this idea of an operating architecture might still sound a little abstract, so let's make it really concrete. We can actually break it down into 4 core functions. Let's call them the 4 pillars that keep an institution from falling over. Okay. Pillar number 1 is participation. This is all about the unwritten rules of engagement. Who gets a voice in the conversation? How do we handle disagreement? How do people actually take part in the life of the institution in a way that feels legitimate and fair to everyone involved? So in a healthy system, the rules are clear, they make sense, and they apply to everybody. But in a degraded system, you get this asymmetry. You have some people who can basically cause chaos with 0 consequences, while others are trying to play by the rules but have no real say. That's when you can feel the legitimacy just start to crumble. The second pillar is learning. And look, this is not about writing more reports. This is about whether the institution can actually absorb lessons from its past and change how it operates. The big question is, does it have a functioning memory? When the learning architecture is working, those post-crisis reviews actually lead to real, tangible change. But when it's broken, you just get a shelf full of expensive reports that nobody ever reads, and the organization's memory just resets to 0 after every single crisis. Sound familiar? All right, pillar number 3, commitment. Institutions are always making promises, right? Mission statements, strategic goals, public pledges. This pillar is all about how those promises stay credible over time, but also how they can adapt when the world inevitably changes. A healthy IOA lets an organization update its commitments without it feeling like some huge betrayal. But a degraded one? It traps leaders in this awful choice. Either you stick to a frozen, outdated promise that doesn't make sense anymore, or you quietly abandon it and just destroy everybody's trust in the process. And that brings us to the final pillar, escalation. Look, conflict is going to happen. It's normal. The real question is, does the institution have any guardrails to contain it?
This function is all about channeling disagreements down productive paths before they turn into existential threats.
A healthy escalation architecture is kind of like a circuit breaker. It stops a small problem from taking down the whole grid. But when it's degraded, every little dispute can short circuit the entire system. Minor issues suddenly become five-alarm fires, and leaders are forced to act like emergency moral referees instead of, leading. So, what's the solution here? The answer isn't to go out and invent a whole new layer of bureaucracy. No. The solution is simply to make this invisible layer, the IOA, finally visible so we can give it the attention it desperately needs.
And this isn't some wild new idea. Institutions have done this exact thing before. We didn't always have formal audit departments, right? Not until things got so big and complex we needed them to govern trust. We didn't have compliance departments until the rules got so complicated we needed them to govern legality. The IOA, it's just the next logical step in that evolution.
Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Great. Does this just mean more committees, more reports, more red tape? And that is a totally fair question.
But the answer is emphatically no. This is not about creating something new out of thin air. It's about recognizing and taking care of something that is already there. But right now is totally informal, nobody owns it, and it's super fragile. It's just about making the implicit rules we all rely on explicit, so we can actually see when they start to fail.
And you can actually start to diagnose this for yourself right now with this simple IOA fitness scan. Just ask these 4 questions about any organization you're in. First, are our rules for participation fair for everyone? Second, do we actually learn from our mistakes and change? Third, can we adapt our core promises without breaking trust? And finally, do we have ways to handle disagreement before it blows everything up? The answers to those questions will tell you how healthy your institution's foundation really is. Because ultimately, it all comes down to this really powerful idea. If you can't put a name to something, you can't see it. And if you can't see it, well, there's no way you can govern it. Just giving a name to the institutional operating architecture is the first crucial step to making it strong. So, I'll just leave you with this final question. Think about the places where you work, or study, or volunteer. Is that invisible foundation being actively taken care of and made visible? Or is it silently accumulating stress, just waiting for that next crisis to come along and crack it wide open?